This is a funny story. It's not in any one of my books, but I just love this story. This is how Milda Rasmussen met Kenneth Osterhout. This is from the Janet Crookston family. So they had an old Chevrolet car, and it wasn't doing too good. So they went up with, let's see, who they say, Pearl was with Kenneth, Mabel with Ed, and I was with Fuss. So six of them piled in the car, and they went up for lunch up into the mountains at one of the campsites in the canyon. But the axle broke. And so when they stopped, after they ate their lunch, um, they decided the only thing they could do was push it onto the road and coast down out of there. I don't know whatever possessed us to think that we could get down out of the canyon without killing ourselves. When we got going down that mountain, I knew that I wasn't ready to die yet. We got along okay at first, and then the brakes burned up and let us loose. Now we had a broken axle and no brakes. The car got going too fast, and Sammy was driving. We were passing all the cars on the road. Then we came to a bend in the road. I was scared to death we were going to miss the curve and roll down the mountainside. When the car would get going too fast, he would run up the side of the mountain, then roll back onto the road, and away we'd go again. Boy, I was wishing I were out of the car. I heard Kenneth say to Pearl, the next time he runs up the side of the mountain, let's jump out. That sounded like a good idea to me, so the next time he went up the side of the mountain, I jumped out, Kenneth jumped out, and the car rolled back onto the road. We were the only two that jumped, and then they were gone again. We started walking down out of Howell Canyon for the home. Kenneth and I walked down to his folks' home and got his dad's car, and he took me home. The rest of the group was home when we got there. A little while after this, Mela and Kenneth began dating and were later married. What a fun story. Okay, this is kind of interesting. Louise was born half dead, or Lewis, and he wrote this. My mother was often very sad. She would cry, and sometimes she was sick. She never let me know what was wrong. My mother was sad because she was worried about me. I was deaf, mute boy, but I was not entirely deaf. I was about half deaf. My own family would stand close to me and speak loudly, and I could hear them and I could understand what they said. Sometimes people would look mad at me when I didn't understand them. I was very sick when I was a baby, and the sickness made me partly deaf. Um, and he writes his own biography, and he just writes the hardness he had, and how he didn't understand a lot of things because people didn't explain them. So he said, when I was a small boy, I never understood much about Christmas. I do remember one Christmas morning when we got up early to see our presents. My sister Thora showed me what was on the kitchen table. An iron horse was hitched to a little cart made of iron. There was a little Iron Man. I liked it, and I had a good time playing with it. So he didn't know what Christmas, he didn't know about Christmas gifts or anything like that. But he talked about his schooling, and this is kind of gives you an idea of what with somebody with a disability like this and how hard it is. He says he started first grade when he was 8 years old, and that was 1917. And he also talked a lot in his journal or his biography about the Spanish flu and how school got closed and that, which is interesting. Third grade, the boys and girls were read, but he was never asked to read. In fourth grade, the teacher did give him a turn to read. The boy sitting next to him would give him the words, and sometimes the girls would too. So he read with the help of his peers. In fifth grade, he was never able to read. He gave me some papers and paints and told me to go ahead and draw some pictures. After school, he helped me with reading and spelling for 2 months. They stopped, and they never told him why. So he's off in a corner drawing pictures and not really learning how to read very well. 1926, he quit school, and he tells how he just didn't like school. And then he went to the deaf school from 1927 to 1933, and he said that was great. He just loved learning. But in 1933, he was 24 years old, and he was too old to still go to school. So that was his schooling, and a tough life, a good biography to read. Somebody similar to that was Constance Marie Stevenson, and this is a picture of her. And she says when she migrated to Schofield, Utah, while they tried to put me in kindergarten class as I did not speak any English, this really upset me, and I would go to school and sit in the laboratory each day and cry my eyes out. When she was in Norway, when she left Norway, she was in the last class of 7th grade, so she's almost finished with 7th grade. She's the little one on the left that you see in that picture. As I left the school each day, the children would chase me and tease me. I couldn't understand a word they said, of course. I was promoted in 2 months and did learn my ABCs. I begged my mother, please take me out of school. I had a dear neighbor friend who was very smart, and we got along well. I learned more from her than I did in school. She took over the class when the teacher left the schoolroom. I attended school until we moved from Schofield. A year later, Clara got us a home and on the east side of Salt Lake. My mother never did learn to speak English. This one's fun. This is from Thomas Edgar Lyon, and they write from Holland. He was called to be the mission president, him and his wife, and they had very small children when they were called infant twins. And they wrote this letter back on one of their Christmas letters. Last Christmas, we had 2 babies creeping a little. Now we have 2 little runabouts who are into everything and keep us constantly amused with their chatter. Another time we came in answer to John's screams and found the room was filled with smoke and a little drying rack full of coals blazing on the rug. They had pushed it up against the gas hearth, and then they sat with their big, wondering eyes watching the flames. Just a few weeks ago, they were left in the bathtub happily playing while their mother went to the kitchen for their cereal. When she came back, a strange woman stood in the hall with 2 little dripping, wet, naked babies. They had been out on the front steps, which are right on the street, having escaped through the front door, which David always leaves open. Up until that time, no one knew they could climb out of the bathtub alone. They use as many Dutch words in English, and strange to say, seem to realize when to use each language. If they are asked a question in English, they respond with yes or no, but if some Dutch person asks, they respond in the Dutch language. What an interesting story. So here's a picture of the wintertime in Cache Valley. I believe that's Cache Valley. Anyway, it talks about Ethel, tells about her being baptized. Ethel is going to be baptized. It was April, and she was to be baptized in the canal above North Logan. It was a cold spring, and the canal was still frozen over. In preparation, the family had to break the ice in the canal to get to the flowing water to be able to perform the baptism. After watching these preparations, Ethel ran away. Her older brothers ran after her and brought her back. She was baptizing that freezing April day. A similar story is told about David Crookston, brother to Nicholas Crookston, and he wrote that time. This is about David and his wife getting married. At that time, in order to go through the temple, they had to be rebaptized. It was necessary to cut a hole through the ice in the mill race in order to baptize them. The people who lived near let mother change her clothes in the house, but father rode a horse home over a mile, and his clothes were frozen stiff when he got there. That was written by his daughter Helen. On the sad side, this is Isabel Jane Dunn. A lot of poets I've come across, and in fact, I'm thinking of writing a book on poems. Anyway, she writes about her 2 little children that died young. This is her poem. My arms have ached these long years past for babes I could not see nor hold. My soul has yearned to cherish the lives I could not mold. For after birth these infants small return to God above. I know he watches, gently guides with wisdom and with love. Some day the privilege mine will be, if worthy I am found, to guide small feet and hear glad song. To me they have been bound. Sad. But here's another poem I found I liked, and it's Iris Wells Shaw. The Gentle Artisan. The wind, for all its bluster, merry clutters up the place, but snow gives earth the women's touch, curtains, fresh paint, and lace. What a pretty poem. The other thing I didn't realize is that before the Spanish flu, they had just one sacrament cup they passed everybody to drink out of. And so the following story is told. Mother told me about going to sacrament meeting on Sundays and how at that time they did not have or use small individual cups to serve the sacrament water in. She said a water pitcher was filled, and after it was blessed, those passing the sacraments would fill a water glass, and it would pass along the row from one to the other, and each person would take a swallow. She said they tried to shy away from sitting in a row where there were mothers with babies. She said the mothers would be nursing their babies, and when the class came to them, they would take a swallow and then pull the baby's head away from her breast and give the child a sip from the glass to be sure the infant was getting the sacrament. She says most of the time there was more back into the glass than what was taken. The water became quite murky by the time the glass got to the other end of the bench. With the Spanish flu, they started doing individual cups until that became a practice throughout the church. Okay. This is Dorothy Lund from Welch, and this is an interesting story of her dating. Ardashir Zahidi, an Iranian son of General Zahidi, head of the military of Iran, and a brother to the Shah, really is quite the guy to date. When we went to Ogden to restaurants, the waitresses used to argue to see who would wait on because he left such generous $10 and $20 tips. We double dated with his friend Arman Karamian, and it was he who came to see me the night after I jilted Audie on a Friday date. Arman informed me that Artie had reserved the restaurant up Logan Canyon and had invited 200 guests with orchids for each lady. It was to be an announcement dinner party. We were engaged. That was an Iranian when an Iranian dates one girl 3 times successfully without dating any other girl in between, he is betrothed to the girl he dates, and that it had caused more than a little stir, and I was not at home the night before. I had no idea such was the offing. Though Addie did bring a huge chest of linens to the house, it had a brilliance for me. It was a ring that must have been 5 carats in size. Well, my mother saw the trunk of linens and she started crying. There was a scene, and Addie took them back out to the car. Addie was always brought gifts, perfume and candy, which mother loved, but I was not to be taken seriously by a foreigner, Ardashir. Ardashir spoke 27 different languages and dialects, was a beautiful dancer, was very handsome, 6'2" or more, and had been educated in the better schools in Europe and was very cosmopolitan and great fun to be with. She tells later when she got married that she showed her kids who she dated, and this guy was found with, Elizabeth was dating Elizabeth Taylor and all these famous people. I actually looked him up on Wikipedia. He did graduate from Utah State. Served as ambassador to the United States in 1960 to 62, the United Kingdom from 62 to 66. And then he became ambassador again to the United States in 73. And then when there was in the mid-1970s, there was a siege on the federal building in Washington, and he and 2 other ambassadors from the Muslim nations were able to talk the hostage takers into surrendering and releasing 149 hostages. So a very significant person. I'm sure that created some memories for her.